The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a massive bowl carved from black stone. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose up from the center floor. Their strange voices mixed together in a loud buzz of excitement. Today was special. Today, they would watch a human die. Captain Lee Hannah stood alone on the smooth metal floor at the bottom of the hall. She was small compared to most of the creatures watching her. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple knot. Her blue uniform looked plain next to the bright colors and strange shapes of the alien clothing around her. She kept her hands at her sides and her face calm, even though she could feel thousands of eyes staring down at her, above her in the viewing section. Commander Park Ji-ho gripped the metal rail so hard his knuckles turned white. He watched his friend stand alone on the combat floor and felt sick. This was not supposed to happen. Humans had come to the council in peace, asking to join their group of planets that worked together for safety. Instead, the aliens had turned it into this nightmare. Lieutenant Kim Min-ho sat beside his commander, his young face pale with worry. He had trained with Hannah for 3 years on Earth. She had taught him how to fight, how to survive, how to never give up. Now he had to watch her face something that no human had ever faced before, something that might kill her in seconds. The noise in the Great Hall grew louder as more aliens arrived to watch. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others crawled on many legs like giant insects. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few seemed to be made of living stone. But they all had one thing in common. They all believed humans were weak. Ambassador Veltar rose from his special seat high above the combat floor. He was tall and thin, with purple skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. His 4 arms moved as he spoke, and his voice carried clearly through the hall without any need for machines to make it louder. "People of the galaxy," Veltar said, his voice smooth and cold, "we gather today to witness the trial of strength. The humans have asked to join our great coalition. They wish to stand beside us as equals in the defense of our worlds. But first, they must prove they deserve such honor." The crowd grew quiet, waiting for his next words. "Our laws are old and sacred. Any species that wishes to join must show their strength in single combat. One of their warriors must face one of ours. The battle continues until one cannot fight anymore or until one dies." Hannah listened to these words without moving. She had known this moment would come ever since the human ships first made contact with alien life 6 months ago. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. Every species had to fight to survive. Every species except humans, according to what the aliens believed. "For this trial," Veltar continued, "we have chosen our greatest warrior. Kethmer of the Varaxian people has never lost a battle. He has fought for 200 years across 1,000 worlds. His strength is legend. His skill is perfect. Today, he will show us what happens when the strong meet the weak." The aliens in the crowd made sounds of agreement. Some laughed. Others made clicking noises or low growls that meant the same thing. They were all certain of what would happen next. A door opened on the far side of the combat floor. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. Kethmer walked into the light, and even Hannah had to admit he was impressive. He stood nearly 3 meters tall. His skin looked like it was made of gray stone, with natural plates of bone covering his chest, arms, and legs. His hands ended in claws, as long as kitchen knives. His head was shaped like a wolf's, but bigger, with teeth that caught the light like white daggers. The crowd roared when they saw him. This was their champion. This was the creature that would end the human dream of joining the galaxy. Kethmer looked down at Hannah and tilted his head like a curious animal. She was so small compared to him, so soft-looking. He had fought creatures twice her size and killed them with one blow. This would not even be good practice. "Humans," he said, his voice deep and rough like stones grinding together, "are you certain you wish to do this? Your female looks barely old enough to fight. Perhaps you have a male warrior who would provide better sport." In the viewing area, Lieutenant Kim Min-ho started to stand up, anger flashing in his eyes. Commander Park Ji-ho pulled him back down. "Stay calm," Ji-ho whispered. "Hannah knows what she is doing." But did she really? Ji-ho had read her file. He knew she had been a soldier before joining the space program. He knew she had fought in wars on Earth and won medals for bravery. But Earth wars were between humans. This was something completely different. This was facing a creature that could tear a human apart with its bare hands. Down on the combat floor, Hannah finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the silent hall. "I am ready," she said simply. Ambassador Veltar smiled, showing teeth that were sharp like needles. "Very well. The combat will last 10 minutes, or until one fighter cannot continue. There are no weapons allowed except what nature gave you. There are no rules except this. Only one may walk away." Raised one of his forearms high above his head. "Let the trial begin." The crowd fell completely silent. Every alien in the great hall leaned forward to get a better view. They expected this to be over in seconds. They expected to see the human female broken and bleeding on the metal floor. They expected their champion to prove once again that strength was everything in the galaxy. Kethmer began to move toward Hannah, taking his time. There was no hurry. She had nowhere to run, and even if she tried, his legs were longer than her entire body. He flexed his claws and rolled his massive shoulders. 200 years of fighting had taught him to read his enemies quickly. This human showed no fear, which was interesting, but also no threat, which was what mattered. Hannah watched him approach and did something that no alien in the hall expected. She smiled. It was not a big smile, and it did not last long. But for just a moment, something flickered in her dark eyes. Something that looked almost like she was looking forward to what came next. The 10 minutes that would change everything was about to begin. The first thing that surprised everyone was how fast Hannah moved. When Kethmer lunged forward with his massive claws reaching for her throat, the aliens expected to see her freeze with terror. They expected her to stumble backward and fall. They expected the fight to be over before it really began. Instead, Hannah stepped to the side so smoothly it looked like she had known exactly where he would attack. Kethmer's claws cut through empty air where her head had been a moment before. His momentum carried him forward, and he had to catch himself to keep from falling. The crowd made sounds of confusion. That was not supposed to happen. Kethmer turned. To face her again, his wolf-like head tilted in surprise. In 200 years of fighting, very few enemies had ever dodged his first attack. Most were too slow or too frightened to move properly. This small human had made it look easy. "Interesting," he rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "You are faster than you look." Hannah did not answer. She stood with her feet apart and her knees slightly bent, her hands open at her sides. Her eyes never left his face. She was watching him the way a cat watches a mouse, except she was the mouse and he was definitely the cat dot in the viewing area above. Commander Park Ji-ho felt his heart hammering in his chest. He had seen Hannah fight before, but only in training. Exercises against other humans. This was completely different. This was like watching a house cat face a tiger. She moved well. Lieutenant Kim Minho whispered beside him, "But she cannot keep dodging forever." Ji-ho nodded, but he did not take his eyes off the combat floor. Something about Hannah's movement had reminded him of something. Something from her military file that he had read years ago. What was it? Down. On the metal floor, Kethmer began to circle his opponent. His claws clicked against the surface as he moved. He was being more careful now. The human had surprised him once, but that would not happen again. The aliens in the crowd began to make bets on how long the human would last. Most thought she would be dead within the next minute. A few generous ones gave her 2 minutes. None of them bet that she would survive the full 10 minutes. "Look at her," laughed a creature with green scales and too many teeth. "She is shaking." With fear? But Hannah was not shaking with fear. She was shaking because she was getting ready. Her muscles were warming up, her blood was flowing faster, and her mind was becoming sharp and focused. This was something the aliens did not understand. About humans, fear could make them weak, but it could also make them dangerous. Kethmer stopped circling and prepared to attack again. This time he would not be so careless. He would use his full speed and strength to end this quickly. He charged forward like a mountain falling. His claws swept toward Hannah in a pattern that would have cut 3 different escape routes at once. No creature could dodge all 3 strikes. Hannah did not try to dodge all 3 strikes. Instead, she did something that made the watching aliens gasp in shock. She stepped forward toward the attack and dropped low. Kethmer's claws whistled over her head as she rolled between his legs and came up behind him. For a moment, she was Close enough to touch his back, close enough to strike if she had been armed, close enough to kill if she had been as strong as he was, but she was not armed, and she was not as strong as he was. So instead of attacking, she jumped away before he could turn around. Kethmer spun to face her, and for the first time, his eyes showed something other than casual confidence. They showed interest, real interest. "You fight like a hunter," he said, his voice carrying a note of respect. "But I am not prey." "No," Hannah agreed, speaking for the first time since the fight began. "You are not." The way she said it made several aliens in the crowd shift uncomfortably in their seats. There was something in her voice that they did not like, something that sounded almost like she was agreeing with him about something else entirely. Dr. Choi Sumi sat in the viewing area. With the other humans, her hands pressed against the glass that separated them from the combat floor. As the expedition's chief doctor and biologist, she understood better than most what they were watching. "She is learning," Sumi whispered to herself. "What?" asked Commander Jiho. "She is learning his patterns. Every time he attacks, she learns something new about how he moves, about how he thinks. This is what humans do. We adapt." Jiho stared at her. "You think she has a chance?" "I think," Sumi said slowly, "that the aliens have made a mistake. They chose their best warrior to fight what they think is our weakest species. But they do not understand what made humans the dominant species on Earth." On the combat floor, Kethmer attacked again. This time, he was faster, more careful, more deadly. His claws came at Hannah from angles that should have been impossible to predict or avoid. She avoided them anyway. Not easily this time. One claw caught the sleeve of her uniform and tore it. Another passed so close to her face that she could feel the wind from it. But she kept moving, kept dodging, kept learning. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were watching in growing confusion as their champion failed to land a single blow on the small human. Some of them began to look worried. Ambassador Velt stood in his special seat, his forearms crossed in front of his chest. His glowing purple skin had grown darker, which meant he was angry. This was not going the way it was supposed to go. The human should have been dead by now. "Why does she not attack?" asked General Nexel, a creature covered in metallic spikes. "She only runs and dodges." "Is this how humans fight?" "She is afraid," Veltar said, but his voice did not sound certain. "She knows she cannot win, so she delays the inevitable." But down on the combat floor, Hannah did not look afraid anymore. She looked focused, calm. "Ready?" Kethmer attacked again, putting all his strength into a devastating blow that would have shattered stone. Hannah twisted away from it, but this time she did something different. As his claw swept past her, she reached out and touched his arm, just a light touch, barely more than a brush of her fingers against his stone-like skin. But it was enough. She was testing something. Kethmer felt the touch and jerked his arm back in surprise. No enemy had ever deliberately made contact with him during a fight. They were all too busy trying to get away from his claws. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Hannah smiled, that same small smile from before. "Learning." The word sent a chill through the watching aliens, though they did not understand why. There was something in the way she said it that made it sound less like an answer and more like a threat. For minutes had passed since the fight began. Kethmer had thrown everything he had at the human, and she was still standing, still moving, still learning. For the first time in 200 years of fighting, the great warrior began to feel something he had almost forgotten. 6 minutes into the fight, Kethmer was breathing hard. This should not have been happening. Phyrexians were built for long battles. Their stone-like skin protected them from damage, and their powerful hearts could pump blood through their massive bodies for hours without rest. He had once fought for 3 straight days without stopping, but somehow, chasing this small human around the combat floor was making him tired in a way he had never experienced before. Hannah, on the other hand, looked like she was just getting started. Her torn uniform was damp with sweat, but her breathing was steady and controlled. Her movements had become smoother, more confident. She was no longer just dodging his attacks. Now she was making him work for every strike, forcing him to change direction, making him waste energy on attacks that never connected. In the viewing area, Dr. Choi Sumi leaned forward with growing excitement. She could see what the aliens could not see. She understood what was happening down on that metal floor. "Commander," she whispered to Jiho. "Do you know what humans were before we built cities and learned to farm?" Jiho glanced at her, confused by the strange question. "What do you mean? On Earth, before we had tools and weapons, how did humans hunt? How did we catch animals that were bigger and stronger and faster than us?" Lieutenant Kim Minho was listening. Now, too, "We ran them down," he said slowly, understanding beginning to show in his eyes. "We chased them until they collapsed from exhaustion." "Exactly," Sumi nodded. "We were persistence hunters. We could not run as fast as a deer, but we could run longer. We could not fight a mammoth with our bare hands, but we could follow it. For days, until it was too tired to fight back." Down on the combat floor, Kethmer launched another attack. His claws swept through the air in a pattern that should have been impossible to escape. But Hannah was no longer where his eyes told him she should be. She had learned to read his body language, to see his attacks coming before he made them. She ducked under his right claw, stepped around his left, and for a brief moment she was inside his guard again. This time, she did not just touch his arm. She struck him. A quick, sharp blow to a spot just below his ribcage. The strike would not have hurt a human very much. But Hannah had been watching Kethmer for 6 minutes now. She had been learning not just how he moved, but how he was built. She had found a weak spot in his natural armor. Kethmer grunted in surprise and pain. The blow had actually hurt. Not much, but enough to shock him. How had she known exactly where to hit? "Impossible," he growled, backing away from her. "Your strength is nothing. That should not have hurt." "You are right," Hannah agreed, circling him slowly. "My strength is nothing compared to yours, but I do not need to be stronger than you." "What do you need then?" Hannah's smile was sharper now, more dangerous. "I need to be smarter than you." The words hit the watching aliens like a physical blow. In their society, strength was everything. Size, power, natural weapons, thick armor. These were the things that mattered in combat. The idea that intelligence could defeat pure physical power was foreign to most of them, but not all of them. In the crowd, an old creature with silver skin and wise eyes watched the fight with growing interest. His name was Elder Karn, and he was older than most civilizations. He had seen species rise and fall, had watched empires bloom and die. He understood things that younger beings did not. "Fascinating," he murmured to himself. "She fights like water." The alien sitting next to him, a young warrior with red scales, looked confused. "What do you mean, Elder?" "Water is soft," Karn explained, his ancient voice barely audible over the sounds of combat. "It has no strength, no weapons, no armor. But water can carve through solid rock given enough time. It finds every crack, every weakness, every flaw." On the combat floor, Kethmer was beginning to understand that he was in real trouble. 7 minutes had passed, and he had not landed a single meaningful blow on his opponent. Worse, he was getting tired while she seemed to be getting stronger. This was impossible. Phyrexians did not get tired before other species. They were built to outlast their enemies. But his arms felt heavy now, and his breathing was becoming labored. Hannah saw his condition and knew it was time to change her strategy. For 7 minutes, she had been learning and surviving. Now it was time to start winning. She began to move differently, more aggressively. Instead of just dodging his attacks, she started to counter them. When he struck with his right claw, she deflected it with her forearm and struck back at his wrist. When he lunged forward, she stepped aside and kicked at the back of his knee. Each of her attacks was precisely placed. She hit nerve clusters that would cause his limbs to go numb. She struck pressure points that would disrupt his balance. She targeted joints and tendons in ways that would slow him down without causing permanent damage. The aliens, watching from above, had never seen anything like it. Their warriors fought with brute force, overwhelming their enemies with superior strength. And weapons. This human was fighting like a surgeon, cutting away her opponent's advantages, one precise strike at a time. "She is not trying to overpower him," whispered General Nexal, his metallic spikes clicking with nervous energy. "She is trying to disable him." Ambassador Veltar's purple skin had grown so dark it was almost black. This was not how the trial was supposed to go. The human was supposed to be dead by now, proving that her species was too weak to join the coalition. Instead, she was making their greatest warrior look clumsy and slow. 8 minutes had passed. Kethmer stumbled as Hannah's kick connected with a nerve cluster in his left leg. His leg went numb for a moment, and he had to catch himself to keep from falling. When he looked up, he saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. She was not afraid anymore. She was not even trying to survive anymore. She was hunting him. "What are you?" he gasped, finally beginning to understand that he might have made a terrible mistake. Hannah stopped moving and stood, perfectly still in the center of the combat floor. Her dark eyes met his, and when she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the silent hall. "I am human," she said simply. "We are what happens when evolution decides that the weak should inherit the earth." The words meant nothing to most of the aliens listening, but Elder Karn understood, and his silver skin grew pale with realization. "By the ancient stars," he whispered, "they are not the weakest species in the galaxy. They are the most dangerous." 9 minutes had passed since the fight began. Kethmer, the undefeated champion of 1,000 worlds, looked across the metal floor at the small human woman and knew with absolute certainty that he was about to lose. The only question now was whether he would survive the experience. 9 minutes and 50 seconds. The great hall had fallen completely silent. Even the smallest whisper would have echoed across the curved walls. Thousands of alien beings held their breath as they watched their undefeated champion prepare for what everyone knew would be his final attack. Kethmer stood at one end of the combat floor, his massive chest rising and falling with labored breathing. His stone-like skin was cracked in several places where Hannah's precise strikes had found their marks. His left arm hung slightly lower than his right, the nerves still numb from her last attack, but his eyes burned with desperate fury. He would not lose. He could not lose. 200 years of victories could not end here, defeated by a creature half his size. At the other end of the floor, Hannah waited with perfect stillness. Her torn uniform was soaked with sweat, but her breathing was steady and controlled. Her dark eyes never left his face. She looked like a statue carved from living stone, except for the small smile that played at the corners of her mouth. 10 seconds remained. Kethmer gathered every bit of strength left in his massive body. This would be his killing blow, the legendary attack that had ended countless battles across the galaxy. He would put everything into this one strike. Either the human would die, or he would collapse from the effort. He began to move. The attack was beautiful in its deadly perfection. Kethmer launched himself across the combat floor like a falling meteor, his claws extended, his powerful legs driving him forward with incredible speed. This was not just an attack, it was an avalanche of bone and muscle and killing intent, focused on one small target. The aliens in the crowd leaned forward, certain that this time there would be no escape. No creature in the known galaxy could dodge this attack. The humans' impossible luck had finally run out. But in those final 10 seconds, something happened that would be talked about in alien military academies for generations to come. Hannah did not try to dodge. Instead, she stepped forward to meet the attack. As Kethmer's massive form hurtled toward her, she dropped low and to the side, placing herself directly in the path of his momentum. Her hands came up not to block his claws, but to guide his movement. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but it seemed to last forever. Hannah's left hand caught Kethmer's right wrist, not to stop his attack, but to redirect it. Her right hand pressed against his shoulder, adding her strength to his momentum rather than fighting against it. She used his own incredible speed and power, turning it into a weapon against him. Physics took over Kethmer's forward momentum, combined with Hannah's precise redirection, sent him spinning through the air. His massive body, built for attacks and overwhelming force, was not designed for this kind of rotational movement. He spun helplessly, his claws cutting through empty air, his powerful legs unable to find purchase. He crashed into the metal wall of the combat arena with a sound like thunder. The impact was devastating. The wall, designed to withstand the strongest attacks from the galaxy's most powerful warriors, cracked under the force. Kethmer's stone-like armor, which had protected him through 2 centuries of battles, shattered like glass. When the dust settled, the great warrior lay motionless at the base of the wall. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but steady. He was alive, but completely unconscious. Hannah stood in the center of the combat floor, exactly where she had been when the fight began. Her uniform was torn and dirty, but she bore no wounds. Not a single scratch marked her skin. She had fought the galaxy's most feared warrior for 10 full minutes and emerged without a single injury. The silence in the great hall stretched on and on. No one moved. No one spoke. No one seemed to breathe. This was impossible. This could not have happened. Their champion, their undefeated warrior, their symbol of absolute power, lay broken at the feet of a creature they had dismissed as weak and worthless. Finally, Ambassador Veltar found his voice. When he spoke, it came out as a whisper that somehow carried through the entire hall. "How?" Hannah looked up at him, her dark eyes calm and steady. When she answered, her voice was as clear. "As a bell, you made a mistake," she said. "You thought strength was about size and claws and armor, but real strength is about never giving up. Real strength is about finding a way to win, even when everyone thinks you should lose." She walked over to where Kethmer lay unconscious and knelt beside him gently. She checked his pulse and breathing. Satisfied that he would live, she stood and faced the thousands of aliens staring down at her. "My species has a saying," she continued. "It is not the size of the dog in the fight that matters. It is the size of the fight in the dog." Elder Karn was the first to understand. The ancient being rose slowly from his seat, his silver skin gleaming. In the dim light of the hall, his voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of countless years. "She speaks truth," he said, his words echoing through the stunned silence. "We have been fools. We looked at these humans and saw only their size, their lack of natural weapons, their soft skin. We did not see their true nature." "What nature?" demanded General Nexel, his metallic spikes clicking with agitation. "Survival," Elder Karn replied. "Pure, relentless survival. They are not the weakest species in the galaxy. They are the most adaptable, the most persistent, the most dangerous." When cornered, in the viewing area, Commander Park Ji-ho felt tears. Streaming down his face, his friend had done the impossible. She had not just survived, she had won, and she had done it in a way that would change how every alien in the galaxy thought about humanity. Dr. Choi, Sumi, was already taking notes, her mind racing with the implications of what they had just witnessed. This fight would be studied and analyzed for centuries. It would become the foundation of human military doctrine in space. Lieutenant Kim Minho simply stared at his former instructor with awe and respect. He had thought he understood what made Hannah special. Now he realized he had only seen the smallest part of her true capabilities. Down on the combat floor, medical teams were rushing to help Kethmer. The great warrior was beginning to wake up, confusion and pain evident in his eyes. When he saw Hannah standing over him, he tried to speak. I do not understand," he whispered. "How did you defeat me?" Hannah knelt beside him again, her expression gentle despite everything that had happened. "I did not defeat you," she said quietly. "You defeated yourself. You were so certain of your strength that you forgot to watch for mine." Kethmer stared at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. In his eyes, the anger and fury were gone, replaced by something that looked very much like respect. "I have learned something today," he said. Perhaps there is more than one kind of strength." Hannah smiled and helped him sit up. "Perhaps. There is. The 10 seconds that changed everything were over, but their effects would last forever." The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours of the combat, every major news network in known space was broadcasting the same impossible story. The humans, those small, soft creatures that everyone had dismissed as harmless, had defeated the greatest warrior in galactic history, not with superior weapons or advanced technology, but with pure skill and determination. The recording of the fight played over and over on screens throughout the galaxy. Military analysts watched it in slow motion, trying to understand how such a small being could redirect so much force. Scientists studied every movement, every breath. This was what humans were actually capable of when pushed to their limits. 3 days after the combat, intelligence agencies from across the galaxy had begun digging into human history. War, not just with other species, but with their own planet, their own environment, even their own kind. They had survived ice ages that would have killed most civilizations. They had thrived in deserts, jungles, mountains, and frozen wastelands. They had turned every challenge into an opportunity to become stronger. "General Namsora requests an audience," announced Veltar Said. A nervous creature with too many eyes, Veltar sighed. He had been expecting this. Send her in. General. Sora entered the chamber with confident steps. She was tall for a human, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her military uniform was simple but perfectly maintained. She carried herself like someone who had never lost a battle, which, according to her file, was exactly what she was. Ambassador, she said, her voice polite but firm. I believe we need to discuss some changes to humanity's status in the coalition. Gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, the kind that reflect reality instead of wishful thinking, Sora replied. She placed a datapad on his desk. These are our military capabilities. The real ones, not the limited information we shared before. Veltar picked up the datapad with trembling hands. As he read, his skin grew darker and darker until it was almost black. The numbers on the screen were impossible. This cannot be accurate, he whispered. I assure you it is, Sora said calmly. We have been preparing for contact with alien civilizations for over 50 years. We knew that eventually we would need to defend ourselves, so we built the means to do so. The truth was even more shocking than the lies they had been told. Humanity did not have a small exploration fleet. They had the largest navy in the galaxy. They did not have limited resources, entire star systems. But the most terrifying revelation was not about ships or weapons or factories. It was about the humans themselves. Every human receives basic military training, Sora explained. Every single one. But your military experts would recognize it as soldier training. Veltar stared at her in horror. You mean your entire population is militarized? We prefer to think of it as prepared, Sora corrected. Across the galaxy, other civilizations were reaching similar conclusions. The Altarian Republic, known for their diplomatic skills, immediately sent envoys to Earth offering friendship and trade agreements. The Corvani Empire, which had been planning to expand into human space, had grown rich by conquering and enslaving weaker civilizations. Their leadership held an emergency session to discuss what they had learned about humanity. We must strike first, declared war leader Thexmore, his scaled hide gleaming under the harsh lights of the war room, before they realize how much stronger they are than us. Elder Quintal, the oldest and wisest of the consortium leaders, shook his massive head. You do not understand what we are dealing with. These humans have been fighting for millions of years. They have turned warfare into an art form. If we attack them, we will not be conquering a weak species. Mean nothing, Quintal interrupted. Did you watch the combat recording? Did you see how that female turned the Varaxian's own strength against him? That is what humans do. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, even the most aggressive members of the consortium agreed that humanity was too dangerous to attack directly. Meanwhile, on Earth, the reaction to Captain Lehana's victory was much quieter, but no less significant. In military academies around the world, her combat technique was being studied and added to training programs. In government offices, diplomats were preparing for a very different kind of relationship with the galaxy than they had originally planned. Commander Park Ji-ho found Hannah in the observation deck of their ship, looking out at the stars. She had been very quiet since the fight, speaking only when necessary. You knew, he said, sitting down beside her. You knew this would happen. Hannah was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. The galaxy is afraid of us now, yes, and that changes everything. She turned to look at him, her dark eyes serious. We came here hoping to make friends. Instead, we made enemies fear us and allies respect us. I am not sure which is better. Perhaps, but fear is a dangerous foundation for peace. 3 weeks after the combat, the Galactic Council convened for an emergency session. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from every major civilization. But this time, the humans were not standing alone on the combat floor. They sat in the seats of honor, recognized as full members of the coalition, with all the rights and responsibilities that came with that. The trial of strength is complete. I hereby welcome them as our newest and most valued allies. Everyone present understood that the galaxy had changed forever. The balance of power had shifted in ways that no one had anticipated. In her seat among the human delegation, they had achieved their goal of joining the galactic community, but the cost might be higher than anyone realized. The galaxy now knew that humanity was dangerous. What they did with that knowledge would determine whether the future held peace or war. Either way, Hannah knew that humans would be ready for whatever came next. They always were. 3 months after the combat that changed the galaxy, Captain Lee Hannah stood once again in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. But everything was different now. She wore the blue and silver uniform of a coalition defense commander, with symbols on her shoulders that marked her as one of the highest-ranking military officers in known space. The hall that had once buzzed with laughter at human expense now fell silent with respect whenever she spoke. The humans had not just joined the galactic community. The Corvani incursion into Sector 7 has been stopped, Hannah reported to the assembled representatives. Combined human and Altarian forces destroyed their invasion fleet, with minimal casualties on our side. A ripple of approval went through the crowd. The Corvani Empire had been terrorizing smaller civilizations for decades, but they had never faced human military tactics before. The war that everyone expected to last for years had ended in 6 weeks. How? Asked Elder Karn, his silver skin gleaming with curiosity. The Corvani had superior numbers and firepower. Hannah smiled, the same small smile that had appeared on her face during the combat months ago. They made the same mistake everyone else makes. They thought superior firepower meant automatic victory. What she did not say, but everyone in the hall understood, was that the Corvani had learned the hard way, before they had turned the enemy's strengths into weaknesses, just as Hannah had done with Kethmer in the viewing area. In just 3 months, she had risen from ship captain to one of the most important people in the galaxy. But more than that, she had become a symbol of what humanity could achieve. Lieutenant Kim Minho sat beside him, now wearing the uniform of a coalition intelligence officer. The young man had found his calling in the complex world of interstellar politics and military strategy. "The Zilithian Consortium wants to meet with us," he whispered to Jiho. "They are offering tribute in exchange for a non-aggression pact." Jiho shook his head in amazement. 3 months ago, the Zilithians had been planning to conquer human space. Now they were offering to pay humans to leave them alone. Down on the main floor, Hannah was finishing her report. "The integration of human and alien military units is proceeding ahead of schedule. Our allies are learning our tactics, and we are learning to work with their unique capabilities. The results have exceeded all expectations. This was perhaps the most remarkable change of all. Instead of fearing human military dominance, many species had eagerly requested joint training programs. Success. The Altarians, with their natural diplomatic skills, had become perfect partners for human military commanders. Even some former enemies had approached the coalition, requesting permission to observe human coalition. "I want to thank humanity for their service," had gradually transformed into respect and gratitude. The humans had not used their power to conquer or dominate. Instead, they had used it to protect and serve. After the session ended, had requested a private meeting. The great Vraxian warrior looked different now. His stone-like armor had been repaired, but his eyes held something they had never held before. "You concluded," Hannah asked. "That I was a fool," Kethmer replied simply. "For 200 years, I believed that physical power was the only thing that mattered. I won my battles through force and intimidation, not the body. From the will to never surrender, not from the ability to overpower others." After a moment, Kethmer took it in his massive, clawed hand, careful not to hurt her. "You will be welcome," she said. "But I should warn you, human military training is not easy." Kethmer's wolf-like face showed what might have been a smile. "I did not expect it to be. The best lessons never are." Later that evening, Hannah stood in her quarters, looking out at the stars through a large window. "The latest reports from Earth," Sumi said, handing over the pad, "of what she had accomplished, but many were also worried about the responsibilities that had been placed on her shoulders." "What do you think?" she asked Sumi. "Should I go home?" "That depends," Sumi replied. "Do you think your work here is finished?" Hannah looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were patrolling alongside alien vessels, protecting worlds that had never heard of Earth just months ago. Human officers were training alien soldiers in tactics that had been developed on battlefields across human history. Beginning, a communication alert sounded, and Hannah activated the holographic display. The image of General Nam Sora appeared, her silver hair gleaming in the light of whatever ship she was aboard. Commander Sora said, We have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. 3 species are requesting coalition assistance against raiders. How soon can you deploy? Hannah straightened, her expression becoming focused and determined. Kumi. 12 hours to assemble a task force. We will be ready. Understood? And Hannah. Sora's voice became softer, more personal. Your parents send their love. They are proud of you. The connection ended, leaving Hannah alone with her thoughts. That arena, expecting to fight for humanity's right to join the galaxy, she had walked out as one of the galaxy's protectors. In the end, that was what humans did best. They adapted, they survived, they found a way to turn every challenge into an opportunity the galaxy had expected her to lose. Instead, she had won something far greater than a single combat. She had won humanity's place among the stars, and she had done it by being exactly what she had always been: human. 3 months ago, she had been supposed to lose, of her entire species. Now, as she prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, the real victory was what came after the chance to prove that humanity deserved its place in the galaxy, not through fear, but through service. The human age among the stars had begun, and it had begun with the simple truth that the galaxy was still learning to understand. Sometimes, the strongest person in the room is the one who looks the weakest. Sometimes, the greatest warriors are the ones who fight not for conquest, but for the chance to protect others. Sometimes, losing is just another word for winning in a way that nobody expected. And sometimes,